You wake up, you drink your coffee, you sit down at your desk to make a game, but what do you make? You remember what you said in your last video.
Gee whiz, I want to make a game like Elden Ring, because that's all I've been doing since it was released.
Game development is a fever dream, and I am a liar. Okay, it's not a total lie because I never promised to finish it, and I was working on it, but that project went nowhere, and I'm sorry. So here's what went wrong.
When I make a game, I hand draw and animate each action of the character. When you jump, that's an animation. When you run, that's an animation. Even standing still and idling about, that's an animation. Now for a game like Elden Ring, there's a big old boatload of different weapons and each one of them has different attack animations. With my current design method, I would have to hand draw an animation for idling, running, jumping, rolling, whatever, for each weapon the player might be holding. You throw in different armor types you can equip, and I'm not about to hand draw an idling animation for every possible breastplate in the game. So this is my solution. Create a character rigging system that animates every limb individually, and I can overlay armored weapons on top of the limbs so a single rolling animation will work no matter what the character has equipped.
I figured this couldn't be too difficult to implement because the math is pretty easy.
This is my hip joint, and if you know the angle and the length of my thigh, a little trigonometry can calculate where the knee joint goes.
All you need to know is that the leg bone connects to the head bone.
Do this for every limb and save each angle of separate keyframes. Then have your fancy code interpolate between the keyframes and voila, an animated character rig. Except for the fact that I'm a monkey and code no work good. Turns out the location of the joints aren't calculating right, so quick fix. Okay, the animation isn't looping and we are just infinitely adding angles. That's one animation down. Easy peasy, but the character needs to transition from the idle animation state to the running animation state, or any other animation state. Yikers. So interpolate the current limb angles to the next animation state. This is great, but presents yet another issue. Running to the left. With sprite animations, I can just flip the image for running in the opposite direction, but since there's so many angles and sprites saved, we need to do more math, more code. With that finally working, I added a lot more animations, even a sword swinging animation, and started to realize this system I set up is terrible. Every time I want to create an animation, especially with new characters, I have to set up all the limb lengths and angles and then guess which angle in the keyframes would look good. This system is ugly and inefficient. Turns out there's a whole software that does this all super easily, and I never found it because I looked up character rig software instead of skeleton animation software. Introducing Spine, a skeleton animation software that is actually compatible with GameMaker. It only cost me $69.
Nice.
This software can do what took me 2 weeks in 10 minutes. Just add your sprites, connect some bones, set the angles and save keyframes, and import the file into GameMaker. This gave me the same result as my Neanderthal code, but streamlines the process. The issue is when learning a new software, you have to learn all the little quirks, and GameMaker does not have great compatibility with Spine. Also, the tutorials on Spine to GameMaker are very sparse or outdated. I ran into an issue with animation states not interpolating correctly, and the only solution I could find was this 4-year-old Reddit post, but their example video isn't even on the internet anymore.
So I gave up and went to EDC Las Vegas with my girlfriend.
While I was there, I really had an itch to play Risk of Rain, but I didn't have a PC with me and there's no mobile version of the game that I could take on the go without a Steam Deck.
So why not fill that void?
I had really been falling in love with the Risk of Rain formula, especially how most of the items can infinitely stack, making you more and more powerful. So you go from this to this. The progression of power is what really makes this game so much fun, and I figured, hey, I made the hit mobile game Cowboy Legs, I could make a mobile game version of Risk of Rain. The first Risk of Rain, of course. The second game is 3D, and that's too many dimensions for my simple mind. The concept is simple. Make a character with side-scrolling platform mechanics and some jump pads, some enemies that drop gold, then chests that take your gold and give you a random item that can buff you up. All you need to do is tie all the variables you want to upgrade to the number of items the player has that buff it. Move speed, jump height, jump amount, attack damage, attack speed, healing rate, any variable that could be improved is tied to these items. The development was going really smooth and had minimal hiccups, and the gameplay started to get pretty fun because this is just Risk of Rain.
Like carbon copy. Everything is the same, but different, but still the same. It's like the off-brand version of an already great game, or every mobile game on the App Store that isn't Cowboy Legs.
Even the enemy and level design was too similar for me to justify myself to continue working on it.
I'm okay with taking inspiration from a game and then making it my own, because all art is derived from existing art. But if I can't find a way to add my own spin on something other than just pixel art, it's time to throw this in the unfinished projects folder where games go to die. So I've been in a bit of a game design rut, and that's when this happened. Yes, drinking. I have been officer. I started playing Escape from Tarkov because why not play the most stressful game I have on my computer? Then my girlfriend broke her neck. She's fine, just a cliff jumping accident that put her C6 vertebrae into about 4 pieces. Now she has some cool hardware in her neck and $110,000 in medical debt because there is nothing wrong with the US healthcare system. I stayed in the ICU with her for a couple days and I had nothing much to do other than play the second best game on my phone, Pixel Dungeon.
It's a modernized version in many aspects of the game Rogue from 1985. It's also a true roguelike according to the Berlin interpretation, so it has random level generation, permadeath, it's turn-based, grid-based, non-modal, meaning there's no attack phase or movement phase like in Pokemon, all actions are available at every point, it has complexity, resource management, hack and slash, exploration and discovery. There's also some other minor, less important rules, but I love Pixel Dungeon. I've played it for well over 6 years and it's perfect to pick up and play while you're waiting for an appointment or taking a poop. I've actually tried to make a game similar to this, and I got as far as designing a bunch of weapons and a turn-based system, but got stuck on the pathfinding and level generation, so there's another game in my dead games folder. But while I was in the ICU with my broken girlfriend, I figured why not combine Pixel Dungeon with elements of Escape from Tarkov. Pixel Dungeon has 25 different floors, and it gets more difficult as you go deeper. It can take up to 2 hours to beat the final boss, but if you die on any floor, all of your progress is wiped, and it's back to floor 1 with no items and no experience. What if you separate those floors and give the player the option to extract with their items and keep them in an off-raid stash, that way they can take them into another run with them? This would create the great risk-reward system that Escape from Tarkov has. If you go in with your best weapons and armor, you have a greater chance of survival, but you run the risk of losing your best items and having to regain that wealth.
In a way, it's like gambling with extra steps.
So we'd be following all the rules of the Berlin interpretation, but permadeath would be semi-permadeath as dying wouldn't delete your off-raid inventory. And you'd be able to use the items you find within the dungeon to upgrade your main base to give options for crafting better items with the random junk you might find in the dungeon. So this time around, I'm going to start with the level generation and pathfinding because those seem like the most difficult aspects. I found this cool article online about how to make random dungeon generation. First, place rooms. Second, fill the empty space between the rooms with maze-like hallways. Third, find places to put doors between the rooms and hallways. And then fourth, clean up the hallways to minimize the dead ends. To place rooms, we set up a script to check if a room of a random height and width can fit in a random location, meaning there's not already a room there. We keep looping this until we hit a predetermined limit. The higher the limit, the more rooms we end up with. Then the complicated part is building a maze function that fills up all the empty space. I found this pretty cool article with a bunch of different maze functions. I mean, look at this one. It just fills the entire space by gradually cutting in half the open areas. This one's really fast, but I have no idea how it works. This one is not very fast. I think this little green box is trying to find the end location by randomly moving around, then it draws a path to that point, but geez man, it takes forever. Like, come on little guy, you can find it. I personally like this one, the step back maze. It randomly moves around drawing a path until it wraps into itself and can't go any further. Then it runs back on the path it took to get there until it finds more open space to fill. Continue looping this until the entire space is filled up. Here it is in action, placing floors and walls winding about. It's kind of mesmerizing to look at. Now to place doors, we check all the rooms and place a dot where possible door location is, being a room floor tile and a hallway floor tile separated by a wall. Once all the tiles in the room are checked, we can select 2 to 4 random dots where we place the door, and 100 errors later, we have our level generation. It doesn't run super fast and definitely needs more optimizing, but the smaller I make the level, the faster this goes. Next up, I want to make a lighting system, similar to what's in Among Us. If the character's vision is blocked, so is the player's. I did this by placing a darkness object over every tile in the level, and if the collision line between the darkness tile and the player doesn't have a wall or other vision blocking object, the darkness object becomes completely transparent, making the area look lit up. If the player is no longer in the line of sight of the tile, it goes to half transparency, so it's not completely invisible and the player knows what areas they've already explored. It looks a little blocky, but it clearly shows what tiles the player can and can't see. Now, here comes the hard part, pathfinding. I'm currently controlling the player with the arrow keys, but I want the entire game to be used with just the mouse so it can be easily ported to mobile devices. There are many ways to do pathfinding, and GameMaker actually has a built-in pathfinding system, but I don't like using these kind of functions unless I completely understand how they work, because it can be really difficult to make the script do what you want to do and not what GameMaker wants. So let's make it from scratch using my boy Sebastian Log's A-star pathfinding tutorial. I strongly suggest watching a series on pathfinding videos because they simplify a really complicated process and provide pseudocode that can work for any coding language. And this is pathfinding. I noticed it too can run pretty slowly if the target is pretty far from the player in the maze, so I'm going to make the overall level a bit smaller to reduce level generation and pathfinding calculations. The level generation also needs a lot more work since the hallways are too windy and the rooms are empty and boring as of now. There's also no combat or any of that juicy loot to pick up.
But we'll do that next time. Anyways, here's a review of Cowboy Legs on the App Store.
Perfect game. I could not even begin to describe the true beauty of this game's graphics and the quality of the audio. I cannot get over this game. Every night before I sleep, I dream of these cowboy legs. Its immersion is truly the best part. I dream of being this cowboy legs, scaling large mountains with a single stride. 15 out of 10. Truly a gem in these times.